So if for some reason you have to leave or you have a friend that wants to watch this, it will be shared with your CCIC later today. It will also be added to our summer workshop schedule in place of the Zoom link. So there are lots of ways for you to view it. Today we are joined by Ms. Bethany. I'm never sure if it's Hubert or Hubert. I think it's Hubert, from Going Merry, which I think is probably the best scholarship search engine out there. I found it a few years ago. It's relatively new, but to me, it's probably the best option for scholarship research. So I am going to let you take this away, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Last thing, excuse me, 1 second. Please put your questions in the chat and we will I'll answer them as we go and we will answer them at the end. Thank you. Sorry.
All good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because otherwise I will forget to share it. But hello, everyone. My name is Bethany, and I am the financial aid specialist here at Going Merry. I'm really excited to talk with you today because we're going to cover basically all of the topics relevant to financial aid. And at the end, I'm going to stop and pause for a question and answer session. While we're going through, your CCICs will be answering questions in the chat as well to help keep up to date with all of that. If you haven't heard of Going Merry before, our platform is completely free and we help with financial aid applications. That includes scholarships. We match you to opportunities with all of them being vetted so you can quickly and easily apply to scholarships. But we also help with the more complicated things, like if you need FAFSA support, we can provide some free support for you there. We can also help with things like financial aid appeals and also deciding which college makes the most financial sense for you. Now, Going Merry is something you can use from the point that you're 13 years old all the way through your high school career and through into your college career as well. So I would really encourage you to make an account if you haven't done so yet. I know a lot of you have, so love to see that. But I really encourage you to go and start looking for financial aid opportunities right now, especially as a rising senior, because there are a lot of scholarships that are opening up and closing over the summer that will have much lower competition than others. Now I'm going to take off my Going Merry hat for the majority of this presentation, and we're going to talk mostly about financial aid as a whole, but occasionally I'm going to put my hat back on and tell you about something we do specifically that makes the financial aid process a little bit easier. The first thing I want to talk about is just defining what is financial aid, and I find this to be incredibly important because most families don't realize what all financial aid encompasses. Most families I talk to think of financial aid as just the federal Pell Grant, and they don't realize that scholarships, student loans, work-study programs, grants from your college, all of that is considered financial aid. So I like to break it into two core categories: gift aid, or financial aid you won't have to repay, and then student loans, or financial aid you will have to repay. Obviously, we want to maximize the amount of opportunities we can receive that are gift aid that we will never have to repay. And to do that, we need to make sure we're doing things like filing our FAFSA or our state aid alternative applications, and that we're making sure we complete as many applications as possible. Now, my big thing that I would encourage you to think about as you're going through this next school year, figuring out how you're going to pay for college, is to think about what type of financial aid you want to leverage. I hope you would say as little student loan debt as possible, because that should be the goal. But I also want to stress that even though there's no shame in needing student loans, we want to avoid them as much as possible. And we want to make sure that we're making a financially wise decision around what college we go to and accessing all of the financial aid opportunities available to us. The next thing I want to talk about is application timeline. Now, the reason why I want to do this is because the truth is there's a lot to do in your senior year, both with college admissions and then also financial aid, and then just getting through your senior year of high school as well. And so we want to make sure you know what all you can do before senior year and then also after. The big thing right now I would stress to you is that you should be looking for scholarships right now. If you haven't applied to a scholarship yet, that should be something that's on your plate, that you're taking care of it. At the bare minimum, you should be writing scholarship essays to get those started as well. I would also really encourage you to explore all of your post-secondary options, whether that's going into the military, going into a vocational program, entering the job market, getting an associate's degree, going to vocational school, whatever that looks like. Understand what your career goal is and the different pathways to get there, because there's not usually only one way to get there. Additionally, I would talk to your parents about any savings that they have. I oftentimes find that parents and students don't have this conversation until much later, and as a result, there's a lot of assumptions made, and we don't want that to happen. It's good to know and be on the same page about what your budget will be with your parents' ability to help you go through college. I also really encourage you to shift your framework around how you're deciding where to apply and where to go to college. Look at it as an investment, both of your time and also potentially of your money, especially if you're taking out student loans. When we think about college as an investment, that means we're going to be making sure we get a positive return and we're looking at future outcomes. I'm going to talk more about this in a little bit, but I really, really encourage you to understand and think about the investment into your future that college is and frame the decisions you make around getting a good return on your investment. I also really encourage you to make a cost-conscious college list. And to do that, one of the big things that I would really encourage you to do is to make sure you have a lot of variety on that list. Students oftentimes apply to the same types of colleges on their list. They'll have all of the elite private schools, or they'll stick to in-state public schools. And as a result, they're oftentimes limiting their options, and they get their financial aid award packages and they all look pretty similar. So I always encourage students to look at private and public universities, look at in-state and out-of-state, look at community colleges, and look at a variety of cost. The reason why I encourage you to do this is because there are different programs that you might be able to access depending on the college. Some colleges have much larger endowment funds, and as a result, they extend much more institutional aid than others. And so just because that starting sticker price is really big doesn't always mean that'll be the most expensive college at the end. And that low cost in-state public university, sometimes it ends up being more expensive than a really nice private college. So be aware of that and give yourself a lot of variety so you have more options to consider when you receive your award letters. I also really want you to have a conversation about with your family about your budget. Understand what they're going to be able to pay out of pocket per semester for your college education, and also understand if they're willing to co-sign student loans if that's something you have to explore to continue your education. Having these conversations up front is going to make sure that you make a better decision and to make sure that that's factoring into the decisions that you're making and you don't commit to a college before you understand that. I also really encourage you to go and do some extra research. Every college has a net price calculator that you can use to calculate what the amount of financial aid that you will receive from them could be. Now, to do that, you typically need to go fill out the FSA aid estimator. This is going to give you an example of a student aid index from your FAFSA that you might receive. And it gives that college an idea of what your financial need might be at their university, and it can give you an idea of what their endowments look like and what you might be able to receive from that university. So that's going to give you a better picture of what their opportunities look like as well. I would also really encourage that in this process, you're paying attention and applying to schools, some that promise to meet needs, and also understand that most colleges don't have that promise. What meets needs actually means is that the college promises to cover all of your financial need at their given university, which is cost of attendance minus your student aid index. So if a cost of attendance is $50,000 and your student aid index is $10,000, you have a financial need of $40,000. And that Meets Needs University is promising to cover that amount of the cost. Now, there is a caveat here. Not all Meets Needs universities promise to do so without student loans. So read that fine print and understand what they actually mean by that. Now, once senior year gets started, this is when it becomes crunch time. The top priority for you should be filing the FAFSA or the Alternative State Aid Application, the MSFAA. These are going to open up for you, and you should make sure that these get submitted, I would say, before the new year. So I always say try and get it in by December 31st or by Christmas. Additionally, you'll be wanting to think about CSS profiles. Not all schools will require that you do this, but the ones that do typically have priority deadlines, and you want to be paying attention to those. I also encourage you to apply to scholarships throughout the entirety of your senior year. Students oftentimes only focus on those in the spring semester of their senior year. That's a big, big mistake. Make sure you're looking now and you continue to look throughout the school year. I also really encourage you to check with your top choice schools, ask them about tuition discounts, ask them about any kind of scholarship opportunities that they may have for you. Connect with that financial aid office, build a relationship, because ultimately we find that students that have relationships with financial aid offices tend to receive more financial aid, specifically more gift aid from their university. I also really recommend continuing transparent conversations, especially around student loans, and to make sure that if at the end of the day, your financial aid offer is disappointing to you, before you ever sign on to a student loan, you submit what's called a financial aid appeal, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Now, everything I just talked about on the last three slides, this is kind of a visual representation of that. We call this the 6 steps to maximizing your financial aid. You'll see that FAFSA and state aid applications are number 1 and number 2 because those are the things that ultimately lead to students receiving the most amount of financial aid. They are your top priorities to take care of. Additionally, you should be focusing on scholarships so that you can receive additional gift aid, both from the colleges, but also from private scholarship opportunities. And you'll see that step number 4 is choosing what college to attend. This is where most students make a mistake. When I talk to students that are rising seniors, they typically have already decided where they want to attend before they even send in their college applications. Try not to do that. We find that when students decide where they want to go before they understand what the money looks like, they tend to just commit to that college anyway, even if they don't get a good offer. So don't do that. Take a step back, try and make a rational and objective decision based on the financial aid offers you receive, and wait to make the decision on where you'll attend until you receive them. I also really recommend always doing a financial aid appeal if you end up with what's called a financial gap, or basically the amount of financial aid that you receive doesn't cover the entirety of the cost of attendance. If you are left with a financial gap, an appeal can help you receive additional aid by you requesting that school reconsider their offer. Step number 6 is student loans. Now, the big mistake I see here oftentimes is that families will skip filing the FAFSA or they'll skip an appeal before they start looking at student loans. We don't want that to happen. Please don't make that mistake. If you skip any of the steps 1 through 5 and go to student loans first, you're doing it wrong. Don't do that. File the FAFSA, look at your state aid options, file an appeal if you have a gap before you sign a student loan. Shifting gears a little bit, this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox, so I apologize. But if you are graduating from high school this year, you should file the FAFSA. It does not matter if you think you're going to go to trade school. It does not matter if you think you're going to go to community college. You think you're going to enter the workforce. You're going to go into the military. It doesn't matter if you know you're going to go to college, but your family makes too much money. You should file the FAFSA anyway. There are a lot of benefits to filing the FAFSA, but truthfully, what happens is that the FAFSA is actually linked to so many more financial aid opportunities that you don't even realize. The FAFSA is what determines if you have eligibility for the Pell Grant, which is what most people think of when they think of the FAFSA. And that is linked to your income and your household structure. But not all financial aid is. In many cases, what's going to actually be used is your financial need determination at that school. A college cannot determine your financial need if you haven't filed your FAFSA because you don't have a student aid index. So you have to file that FAFSA. Now, the FAFSA is also going to make you eligible for state aid programs. So if you go to college in state, you'll be eligible for those if you file the FAFSA. Additionally, a lot of colleges tie eligibility for their institutional aid, even their merit-based institutional aid, to filing the FAFSA. And private scholarship opportunities are often linked to the FAFSA as well. So it's not just the Pell Grant, it's not just income specific. There are other things that are tied to it that you're just not aware of. So make sure you're filing the FAFSA. I'll also talk about this in a little bit and dive deeper into this, but the financial aid appeals process is also tied to the FAFSA. So if you don't file the FAFSA, you don't have the ability to come back to the college if something goes wrong halfway through the school year, that your parent loses their job, they have to stop work because they have an injury, whatever might happen. You don't have that fallback plan, nor do you have the ability to even request that the college reconsider their initial offer that they give you. So the FAFSA is incredibly important. I will also stress, because a common misconception is that if my college requires a CSS profile, I don't need to file the FAFSA. That is incorrect. The CSS profile only makes you eligible for institutional financial aid opportunities. It does not make you eligible for state or federal or private scholarship opportunities. So make sure you are filing it so that you have access to as many opportunities as possible. Why leave the door shut, right? We want to make sure we have those. Now, you might be asking, why is all of this stuff tied to the FAFSA? And the reality is that it's because the FAFSA is one of the strongest predictors of post-secondary enrollment. And we find that it also greatly increases the likelihood that students will take on less student loan debt or no student loan debt. So really, really important. Now, I mentioned earlier that the FAFSA determines your student aid index. What a lot of families think the FAFSA does is that it actually determines how much financial aid you'll receive and that they'll be making you a financial aid offer. That's not the case. The FAFSA is an application, and the data from that application is sent to every college or university that you share it with. What will then happen is they will take that student aid index that the FAFSA determined for you, and they will subtract that from their cost of attendance. And that will tell them your financial need at their specific college. That college then will have its own process, and it will vary college to college, where they will then determine how much aid that they will extend to you in institutional and state opportunities and stuff like that. So be aware of that. Another thing to be aware of is that oftentimes financial aid can be a first come, first served basis. And so a lot of colleges do have priority deadlines, which is why it is so important to make sure you file the FAFSA as quickly as possible. And I always recommend before the turn of the new year. That way you have that ahead of most of those priority deadlines. Talking a little bit more about this student aid index, if you've heard of the expected family contribution, or EFC, that is what the student aid index replaced this year. And so this is essentially just an index that the college is going to use to be able to determine your financial need. It is not going to be an estimate of what you are to pay out of pocket. It is not really meant to represent necessarily a dollar amount at all. It's just a number that that college then uses to look at your financial situation in an objective way and compare it to other students' financial situations. Talking a little bit more about the FAFSA, a lot of families I'm talking to really want to know what they can do right now to prepare for the FAFSA, especially because this past year was a little bit rough for the seniors that filed the FAFSA for the first time. The reality is that the FAFSA will not open until October 1st. I will also caveat that by saying it should open on October 1st. Technically, the Department of Education has yet to commit to that date, but they are saying that that is their target date to open the FAFSA this year. So be aware that it will open up on October 1st, but also stay on top of communication from your counselor just in case that does shift around a little bit. What you can do right now is create your FSA ID if you have not done so already, and also have your parents create an FSA ID if they do not have one. Now, determining who your parent contributor is might be a little confusing, but for the most part, if your parents are married and they file their taxes jointly, only one needs to have an FSA ID. If your parents are married, but they file their taxes separately, then both will need an FSA ID. If your parents are divorced, and I know that impacts a lot of students, how you determine who your parent contributor is has changed this year. So be aware and slow down. There's some really great infographics that I can share with your CCICs to help you with this process. But essentially, the parent who provided the most to you financially in the last 12 months is who should be on your FAFSA, who you should be inviting to your FAFSA. It does not matter who you lived with. It does not matter who claimed you as a dependent on their taxes. It is simply who provided the most to you financially over the last 12 months. So if you have questions about that, always take a pause, talk to a financial aid officer at a college or university, talk to your counselor. But generally, most students will only need one parent to create their FSA ID. And then if you have divorced or separated parents, reach out for a little bit of help. Make sure you look at that infographic and you select the right parent, because it can drastically change your financial aid opportunities. You can also make sure to go ahead and complete that FAFSA preparation assignment that I've linked here on this slide. It'll walk you through the different questions that we see on the FAFSA, let you kind of know what they're looking at, and it can be a little bit helpful to understand that so that it's not so confusing and frustrating when you get to the application. I really strongly recommend that you do your student aid index estimator now and then use those net price calculators at universities to see about how much aid you might receive. And I really recommend making sure that you get your information from reputable sources. So sign up for our newsletter on Going Merry, and also make sure you're staying in communication with your counselor. They will send you lots of emails and newsletters and notifications to keep you up to date. So make sure you're paying attention, open those. I know a big frustration point with counselors I talk to all over the country is students and parents don't open their communication. That's a big mistake, because they will be giving you the most up-to-date changes with financial aid and helping you get that FAFSA completed, including any support that they're able to offer you. Okay, hopping off the soapbox, but I hope you understand every student should file the FAFSA. Doesn't matter what your situation is, you should file the FAFSA. Let's talk about scholarships. This is what a lot of students like to talk about the most. The biggest thing I will tell you is that scholarships are only one piece of the puzzle when it comes to financial aid. And if you think you're going to cover all of your college expenses with scholarships, that's highly unlikely. It's going to be one piece of the puzzle to pay for your college education. So it's really important to learn about financial aid, learn how all of it is accessed, and learn how to apply to as many opportunities as possible. It's also really important to understand that one of the biggest impacts in college accessibility is the affordability of college. So make sure you're looking at choosing the college that makes the most financial sense, not necessarily always the college that's your top choice, but sometimes taking a step back and saying, you know what, objectively, which college makes the most sense for me is a good place to start, can really help you minimize the amount of the gap that you need to cover with those scholarships. Now, talking about some strategies that we can use, the first one I will say is choose better odds. This means looking at scholarships where fewer students are eligible to apply or fewer students will apply to the opportunity. The next one is the more the merrier. When I talk to students, they always tell me I applied to a lot of scholarships, and then I ask them how many, and they'll say 10 or 15 or 20. And I ask them how many they won, and they'll say I didn't win any or I only won one. That is a big mistake. The reality is that scholarships are highly competitive and it is a numbers game. So you want to treat it like a job. And if you were applying for a job and you hadn't gotten the answer of yes just yet, you would keep applying. You should do the same thing with your scholarships. Set aside time, dedicate yourself to them. I personally, in my high school career, I set aside 1 hour every Saturday and I looked for and applied to at least one scholarship. Doing that made me be very consistent and very dedicated to the process, and it also made sure that I submitted a lot of scholarship applications. I also really recommend that you complete and consistently update your Going Merry profile. This is going to allow us to match you to opportunities so you can sift through the really vast library of scholarships really quickly and efficiently. More tactically, some things that you can do to apply those strategies. The first one is look for your local scholarships. I know Montgomery County has a lot of local scholarships, so talk to your counselor, find those opportunities. Typically, I find them on your district's website, so look at those. Those scholarships are going to be the ones you have the absolute best chance of winning. So they should be the top priority for you to apply to, and you shouldn't miss a single one of those deadlines. The next category is going to be those institutional scholarships or college scholarships that the college offers specifically. Now, every college is a little bit different about how they do their applications. Some have like a common app for you to do. So you apply to admissions and that automatically applies you to their scholarships. Others will have departmental ones or they'll have you apply to them one-off. So be aware of that and be paying attention. I will also say one of the best tips I have for looking for college-specific scholarships is look on the departmental page for the major you're interested in. So in my example, if I wanted to go to the University of Alabama and I wanted to be a business major, maybe a marketing major, what I would do is look up Culverhouse School of Business scholarships for freshmen. And I would do that again in my sophomore year, junior year, and senior year as well, just to make sure I'm finding all of those opportunities because oftentimes there are scholarships for upperclassmen in college as well. The next two, small awards and essay scholarships, these are the scholarships most students look over. That is a big mistake. Small award scholarships oftentimes add up very quickly for students, and that is because students are not applying to them, and so there's oftentimes only a couple of applicants for each of them. And that's because students are looking for those full ride scholarships. That's what everyone wants, right? I will just be really transparent with you. The full ride scholarships make up less than 0.1% of all scholarships that are out there. They are going to receive tens of thousands of applicants each, and so they are going to be very, very competitive and difficult to win. So I'm not saying don't apply to those. You absolutely should. Every student should. But be aware of that and choose the less competitive options as well. And make sure you understand that those will add up very quickly, especially with local scholarships when you're winning 2 or 3 or 4 of them at a time. The next one is essay scholarships. A lot of students don't want to do essay scholarships, and I can understand they're very time consuming, and with your course load and your extracurriculars, it can be hard to find the time. My tip here is to look at the most common essay prompts for the last academic year and pick 2 or 3 of those prompts that are a little bit diverse and write essays on those. Then I would reuse those over and over again, tweaking them here or there to answer a prompt more specifically. If there's something that's a little bit more nuanced in one prompt, but you can apply that, go ahead and use it. That's going to allow you to apply more efficiently. Now, it's not going to cover all of them. There's always a one-off essay about zombie apocalypses, so you'll have to do those, but that can really help you out with making sure you apply to as many of those essay scholarships as possible. And the last tip I have is start early, so now, and keep going. Most students I talk to apply to scholarships only starting in January through about April of their senior year. That's a mistake. There are scholarships open all throughout your high school career, especially starting now in the summer of your junior year into your senior year. And those scholarships will continue to be available to you even all the way through college. There's a lot of scholarships, especially offered directly from the college, that will be offered to upperclassmen. So continue to look for those opportunities. I also recommend Going Merry, obviously, and that's because we vet every scholarship on our platform and we match you to the opportunities, and we make it really easy for you to apply by auto-filling the applications, and we even have an auto-apply option as well. We also list local scholarships and national scholarships all in one place, and we highlight the local ones so you can apply to those more specifically, a little bit easier. But Going Merry is not the only scholarship platform out there, so I always like to give a couple more options. FastWeb, scholarships.com, College Board, Scholarships 360, Scholly, lots of different places for you to look. I will just say not all scholarship platforms actually vet their scholarships. So if you find a scholarship that's only listed in one place, take a second and do a little bit more digging. Make sure it's a legitimate opportunity. Also, make sure you never apply to a scholarship that's going to charge you or ask you really personal information that you don't feel comfortable with. So just be careful. There are some scholarship scams out there. Not all platforms are like Going Merry and don't vet them. So do a little bit of due diligence. I will say if you find it somewhere else and it's on Going Merry, then you know it's true and you know it's a real opportunity. So you can use that as a kind of a pulse. But sometimes the scholarship provider will only list their scholarship on one specific platform. And as a result, you'll have to do a little bit more digging just to make sure that it's a good opportunity. The next thing I want to talk about is actually choosing the right college for you. This is the thing that will make one of the biggest impacts on your ability to afford college without debt. We really want to make sure that you understand your budget, that you're comparing the costs, and that you're also comparing the award letters that you receive. And then we want you to look into the future. We want you to understand what are the future outcomes for graduates from this university. And also, if I'm taking out student loans, how is that going to impact my income going forward? So what I'm going to do is actually play a video of how we help you do this on Going Merry, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it.
What we're going to focus on is how they make sure that they choose the right college too by comparing the different financial aid offers they get. So I'm going to click onto this to show you how that works. Now, look, the first thing, as I said, is that it's really complicated for students to understand all of the different terms used in financial aid award letters. And sometimes it feels a little bit like the colleges do that on purpose. You'll see on this first page of our tool is we sympathize with students. We acknowledge that it's difficult for them to understand it. I referenced this kind of incredible study that was done 4 years ago that found that there were 136 different terms used to describe the same type of federal loan. It becomes impossible for students to truly understand it. So we give them that bit of context to help get them started, make sure they feel heard and supported. And then what we do is ask them to fill out the information from their award letters. We've used these two universities. We have no links or anything to the universities, but I want to show you a live example. So what the student will do with their first college is input all of the costs that they have in the award letter, the grants and scholarships that they've been awarded in it. They'll input to their work study. And then finally, of course, the different loans that they've been offered to. Once they've done that for each of the colleges they're considering, we'll come through and actually ask them what their family contribution is going to be. And in particular, what the real family contribution, there's always a lot of frustration about the expected family contribution being way off. So we just ask, what can your family afford to contribute? And based on that, we'll crunch the numbers and come up with 3 recommendations for your students. The first is about how they maximize their long-term wealth. You can see it up at the top here. The second is then about how they minimize their student loan debt. And the third is about how they minimize their costs. Now, we recommend this top one, but we know other families have different priorities. So we want to give students these 3 different recommendations. Scrolling down, we make it really easy to understand how they're different and help families choose which one is most relevant to them. There's a quick, easy 2-minute video that is perfect for the attention span of your students to explain how everything works. But most importantly, if you keep scrolling, is this standardized financial aid award letter for each college. So it takes all these complicated terms and just spits out really standard, clear answers for students, like showing them their net cost and how that differs between each college, and then also the financial gap that they have for each college. And so suddenly, from all these complicated different letters, you have a really clear idea of exactly what each college is going to mean in terms of your costs. Scrolling down, we also want to give students a sense of what their future looks like. If they decide to go to that college, what will that mean for them in terms of their future salary, for example? And so again, for each college, we show them their expected future salary and their expected future loan payments. And a really important thing here is we show them what percentage of their future salary is likely to be spent on loans. What you can see is that Bowdoin, despite the fact we saw earlier that it was this higher financial gap and higher net cost, because it has that higher monthly salary, ends up being a lower percentage of future salary that's getting spent on loans. You can also see that by looking at the student's long-term future. So we show over time, and again, this is using data that comes from the US Department of Education. We show them what their total earnings will be over the next 20 years after their graduation, as well as how much will be spent on loans and interest, and give them a really clear way of understanding which will help them maximize their total earnings after loans. Again, we talk about other concepts for them, like acceptable levels of student debt, but like with everything we do on Going Merry, we really make it really clear and easy for the student to understand so that they make the right decision when it comes to paying for college. I'll wrap up there. Thanks so much for watching, and we're looking forward to helping your students maximize their financial aid and then make the right decision when it comes to which college to. Thanks.
So I hope that makes a lot of sense and you understand why it is so important to make sure you wait until you receive those award letters to decide where you're going to be going to college. I will call out that be very careful to make sure you are comparing apples to apples in terms of the offers that you receive. Make sure you're determining if you're receiving student loans. Excuse me, I might have to cough. I've got a little bit of bronchitis, so I'm struggling a bit. But make sure you compare those award letters. Make sure you're looking at apples to apples comparison. Is one college telling you about indirect costs and another one isn't? What is included in those indirect costs? Do those all apply to you? If you know that you're going to be living off campus and at home, then obviously room and board estimates isn't something that you need to factor into that decision for one specific college versus another. So think through those things and make sure you're thinking through what the future outcomes are, especially if you're looking at student loans. Make sure you're getting a positive return on your investment from your time and any money that you invest into your college education. We do see sometimes that students will look at these award letters and they'll read them independently, but not comparing them. And because they got an offer from, or they got accepted into the college that was their top choice, they'll just kind of accept it, not seeing that a lot of it is student loans. Please don't make that mistake. Slow down, read them, compare them. I will also say that I would encourage you to make sure you're looking at, if you are taking out a student loan, look at what your post-graduation debt to income ratio is. A lot of times students will come in here and they'll see that their top choice school is a 40% debt to income ratio, meaning 40% of their income when they graduate will be going towards the monthly payment of that student loan. And then their second choice school is 5%. That second choice school is a much better financial decision in the long run. So be comfortable making that objective kind of evaluation about your financial future. The next thing I want to talk about is the financial aid appeals process. This is where you reach out to the college after you receive your financial aid award letters, which, by the way, they typically come in sometime between January and April is when we usually see them. This past year was a little bit odd and some students still haven't received them. But with the FAFSA moving back to its correct open date, then we should see those award letters sometime between January and about March. A financial aid appeal is where you say, hey, my financial aid offer you gave me, that is disappointing. I need more money to come to this school. Colleges can consider that. The big caveat is you do not have this as an option most times if you have not filed the FAFSA or the CSS profile. And if you file this, maybe you do it after the fact, you realize my offer is disappointing, I'll file the FAFSA now and see what happens because you want to do an appeal. You might be filing the FAFSA now after their priority deadline, which could also mean you miss out on money that they would have reconsidered and given you. So make sure you file that FAFSA so you have this as an option. A big reason to file the FAFSA as well for the appeals process is because if your financial circumstances change throughout the school year, you can actually file an appeal to the school and get them to change your financial aid award in the middle of the school year. So if your parent gets laid off in December, then you can actually reach out to your financial aid office at your school and say, hey, this is what's happened. And they can rewrite your financial aid offer so that you can stay in school and not have a hiccup in your college education. Now, some really common reasons we see for writing an appeal letter are that students maybe got waitlisted and then they're just now getting an answer at their top choice school and it wasn't enough. Another thing we see is that the student will receive a better offer from another school or a higher ranking university. We also see that students often are filing an appeal because their FAFSA doesn't reflect some nuanced situation that their family is experiencing. The FAFSA asks questions based on what your taxes can report on, essentially. That's the easiest way I know how to explain it. And so they're not going to necessarily always see all of the medical expenses that you incurred in the last 6 months because your sister was diagnosed with something, or they're not going to see that your family is taking care of grandma who's elderly and needs some extra assistance and is now living with you. That's not always captured on the FAFSA because it's looking at your prior tax documents from 2 years ago. So we can always write in and explain those circumstances. Another thing is that financial circumstances have changed. Parents get laid off, parents get divorced, things like that happen. The student can actually file a financial aid appeal on those grounds, and you should, because you are probably eligible for additional financial aid. Now, the one thing I will say is if you have a lot of reasons for an appeal, you do not want to just throw spaghetti at the wall. You want to find your best top 2, maybe 3 reasons for an appeal and use those and really substantiate them. Other tips I have for a financial aid appeal is approach it with the right mindset. Do not look at this as a negotiation. You're making a request and the college can deny it. It's their own prerogative to do so because they're making an exception. They're making what's called a professional judgment. So approach it with grace, approach it respectfully, and ask that college for additional aid. I always also recommend you tell the college that they are your top choice school, which should be honest because you shouldn't appeal to more than 2 or 3 universities. And so it should be honest that they are your top choice school and you want to go there. And the only thing that's stopping you is the money. Also be prepared with specific numbers and documentation. Colleges are going to look at this and they're going to want to make sure that you're telling them the truth. Unfortunately, they can't just take you at your word because some students do lie. So be prepared, be specific, and make sure that you're submitting it ahead of any kind of priority deadlines and through the right processes that they may have. My one recommendation is do not look at their website for that information. Call or email the financial aid office to ask them, when is your priority deadline for a financial aid appeal? How do I need to submit it? And who should this be addressed to? Doing that is going to make sure you get it to the right person in the right hands and in the right time. And I find, unfortunately, sometimes their websites are outdated, especially when it comes to the financial aid appeal information. So make sure you reach out to them directly. On Going Merry, we actually have a tool to help with this. So I'm just going to play it because it also kind of shows you what goes into a financial aid appeal letter. What this tool is essentially using AI in our template that had a 70% success rate to auto-rate the letter for you. Additionally, if you get stuck while you're using this tool, you can also reach out to us and we'll help you write different sections for free. So if you're like, I know that something went wrong with my FAFSA, but I don't know how to explain it, this is what it is, we can help you write that. So I'll go ahead and play this so you can see what that looks like.
Hello and welcome. This is a quick video guide to the Financial Aid Appeal Generator and how it can help you write an appeal in 4 steps. To get started, you'll want to go to goingmerry.com or download the Going Merry app. Note that this tool is only available to high school seniors and parents. From there, go to the Appeals Generator and click on Start Now. Step 1 is to enter your basic info. You'll answer a few questions about yourself and your college. If you already have a Going Merry profile, your basic info should be filled out automatically. You should see an appeal letter introduction pop up on the right-hand side. For step 2, you'll answer questions about your school and why it's your top choice. You can find some example answers here if you're not sure what to say. We recommend providing a couple specific reasons. For step 3, you'll fill out the reasons for your appeal. You can choose from 6 options. Choose option 1 if you got a better financial aid package from a similar college. If you're not sure what that means or are having trouble deciphering your aid package, you can view these resources at the top to learn more. You can add up to 3 colleges here. If you were accepted to a better ranked college, select option 2. You'll need to upload your admission letter here. If your family income this year is lower than expected, choose this option. Here, we provide a couple of common reasons you can choose from for why your family income went down this year, or you can provide your own reason. If your family had more expenses than they reported, choose option 4. Option 5 will apply to most students who either made a mistake on their FAFSA or there was something wrong with the form. This last option is here if you don't see your reason on this list. Here you can give more information about why you are appealing. Once you have provided all your reasons, you can preview your letter and make any changes and edits. When you're happy with it, you can generate the PDF and you're done. From there, you can send the letter to each college.
So I hope that makes sense and you kind of understand the different components that go into the financial aid appeal letter. I will say this is something that you won't be thinking about just yet. It'll be something you probably revisit sometime in March, April, so that you can get a financial aid appeal into a university that you really want to attend, but you didn't get enough money to go. I will say the biggest rule I have for a financial aid appeal is make sure you submit it before May 1st. That's traditionally the national decision day where you have to commit to the university that you're going to attend to. And colleges typically are more willing to consider a financial aid appeal if you submit it before then. Again, their priority deadline may be before that though, so make sure you try and get it ahead of that too. But those are the things that you want to keep in mind with this process.
Hello and welcome. This
Tried to replay the video. The next thing I want to talk about is student loans. And I really want to spend time here mainly because we find that students make better decisions and apply to more financial aid when they actually understand student loans. And so we want to talk about that. I again want to stress that there's no shame in needing a student loan to go to college. It's extremely expensive. I was, talking with a couple of your CCICs earlier and I said, if college was expensive as it is today, when I went to school, there's no way I could have afforded it because I was a first generation student and it was super intimidating to me. And so college is really expensive. It's okay to acknowledge that and to acknowledge that student loans are part of the picture for some students. There's no shame in that. What we want to avoid is taking out student loans when we don't have to, which means we're applying ourselves, we're applying to scholarships, we're looking at the FAFSA state aid applications, we're choosing affordable colleges, we submit an appeal before we do this process. It's also really important to understand the 4 different types of student loans. There are going to be student loans that are offered from the federal government, and then there are going to be private student loans. But even within those student loans offered from the federal government, there are 3 different types. So I tend to break apart federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized together, and that's because they're very similar. The biggest difference is that the subsidized loans do not accumulate interest while you're in school, and you can only receive them if you demonstrate financial need at that university. So sometimes you'll see that one college offers you them and another college does not. So be aware of that. The nice thing though is that these loans are typically going to have lower interest rates than the private market, and their interest rates are fixed so that they are easier to repay. They're also not going to require a guarantor. And so if you're a student needing to get a student loan or you're needing to cover your costs completely independently, your parents refuse to help you at all, these are going to be the loans that you're able to take out the easiest to be able to cover your college expenses. The one thing that I will say is that even though the subsidized loans do not accumulate interest, this unsubsidized do. And regardless, you want to be trying to pay down the loan as you go. And this is true for any student loan. That way you can minimize any kind of interest that does accrue. You also are ineligible for these if you do not submit the FAFSA. And these are the student loans you would want to take out if you had to take out a student loan. They're generally considered the best opportunity for students to consider. Oh, and also you don't have to repay these loans while you're in school. I don't know if I said that because I kind of glossed over it, but you don't have to repay these loans while you're in school. It's just recommended to minimize student loan interest. The next one is going to be Parent Plus loans, and these are going to be loans that are in the name of your parent, not you. The big caveat here that a lot of families don't realize is that that means that this loan is in the name of the parent from the point that it is taken out to the point that it is paid in full. The parent cannot transfer it to the student's name at any given time unless they refinance it to a private student loan provider, which then kind of does away with all the benefits of having a federal student loan provider. Additionally, most of the time we find that students are ineligible to take on that loan once they graduate because they don't have credit and they don't have the income to substantiate the sum. So be aware of that. Make sure your parents talk about that, especially if they're thinking, well, when you graduate, you'll take it over, because with Parent Plus loans, that's not an option. The big thing here is that they're structured more like a traditional loan. And so they're going to have an origination, they're going to do credit checks, all that kinds of good stuff. And they do expect you to make payments once that loan is dispersed. You do have the option to defer, but again, interest accumulates and it's not recommended because it can make the cost of the loan ultimately be much higher. The nice thing is that these are offered from federal student loan providers. They're more likely to work with you. And so it can be a really good option for families, especially if they have lower credit histories and they need to get a student loan to cover their students' expenses. One thing I will say also about the Parent Plus loan is the interest rates, unlike the subsidized and unsubsidized, they are not set by the federal government. They're set by the market. And so if you do have a really strong credit score, sometimes you do get better rates from private student loan providers. So if you're in a situation where you feel like you've got a strong credit score and you're looking at Parent Plus loans, sometimes it's also good for you to take a look at the private student loans as well. And in those cases, those loans will be in the name of the student, which for some parents is what they would prefer. With private student loans, do your research. Give yourself a lot of time. Do a lot of research. Look into Trustpilot reviews, look at how they treat their customers, call into customer service and see how quickly you can get them on the phone and how they treat you. Ask about benefits and features that are interesting to you, like rate discounts and like a rate discount for auto pay or a mobile app, or if you want the option to defer. Not all student loan providers that are private do offer that. You can get a private student loan from a lot of different places, including credit unions and banks and private companies. But the rules, the interest rates, the terms, everything varies so greatly depending on where you look. They do all basically require a cosigner if the student is the primary on the loan, but some do also offer parent-only loans as well, so that the student loan will be in the name of the parent only. Generally, when you're looking at a student loan and you're deciding if you want to be a student primary loan as a private loan, parents choose to do that because then the student is building credit, as well as it gives them a better eligibility for a larger amount typically for student loans. But again, before we get to this point, before we look at student loans at all, we should be exhausting all of our options first. And I want to stress that. If you do get to this step and you realize at the end of the school year, you do need to take on student loans, you're going to have to figure it out, ask for help, talk to the financial aid office at the school you're interested in, get some advice. They'll be able to help you through this process, or you can reach out to us and we'll answer questions to you as well so that you feel like you know what you're doing and you can make that decision confidently. But again, avoid student loans whenever possible. Apply to the FAFSA, do everything you can. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I know that's a lot of information. If you don't have a Going Merry account, if you want to scan that QR code, you are more than welcome to make an account really quickly. We do have accounts for parents and students, so that is something you are able to do. I will open up the chat and just see if I've missed anything that I need to answer. I did see one question submitted to me privately, so I'll ask that one out loud. The question was, are there financial aid opportunities for need-based financial aid opportunities for those who are not eligible to complete the FAFSA? The answer is yes. I would submit the MSFAA, that's the state alternative aid application, if you're a student without a social. That is something you are able to do. Additionally, if there are going to be programs that are offered from colleges and private scholarship providers, and there are sometimes even state-based programs that will be offered to you as a student that's ineligible to complete the FAFSA. If you need help with this, reach out to us or reach out to your CCIC and they'll be able to help you out with that. All right.
Bethany, can I ask you a clarification question?
Sure.
This is Sarah Kessler, CCIC from Watkins Mill. On one of your early slides, you had the bubbles, you had the federal, state, all the different kinds of aid. And the federal said average award $15,000, but I thought the max annual award was around $8,000. So can you explain where you got that number?
Yes, that's because a lot of people think of FAFSA and they think of only the Pell Grant, but it's not just the Pell Grant that the FAFSA can award. It can also award federal student loans, which are included in that calculation, as well as oftentimes institutional aid and state-based financial aid opportunities that students are then eligible for. So that's actually a number from the federal government.
Okay, I just think that's a little bit, it's like a multi-layered answer, I guess, but the strict FAFSA Pell is around 8,000 a year. I just want to make sure people kind of understood that.
Yes.
That the 15,000 is on top of that as other things.
Yes, but it's important to understand that when we look at how the federal government evaluates financial aid and how colleges evaluate financial aid, they include all of that. They include student loans, they include scholarships from their college. That's how they factor it in and they decide how beneficial the FAFSA is on average. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, so I'm Stella from Wheaton High School. I just had a question about scholarships because I know that you have to apply for the FAFSA every year. But in terms of scholarships, so for college, for scholarships, you only apply before the year. And let's say like
Scholarship. Every scholarship and grant that a college or a private scholarship provider may offer you is going to have different terms set by them. In some cases, you're going to get that award your first year and they're going to say it's being extended to you all 4 years up front. They typically will tell you up front, but you can ask as well. Typically, if they do that, they're going to set standards for you to achieve, like satisfactory academic progress. So you need to get through this many credits every semester and you need to maintain this GPA. And if you go below that, then you no longer receive the award. Other times it will be a one-time award. And again, they'll usually tell you that up front. So it's just, I would ask if it's not explicitly clear in that scholarship offer that you receive, but typically they'll be really clear with you and let you know.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I'll look through the,
Bethany, I dropped a question in the chat, but I'll share it here. Can parents create a Going Mary account and include all their students' information and apply for scholarships to help them on their behalf? Or is a parent account completely separate and you couldn't use it to actually apply?
you can put in your student's profile information and see the opportunities that they're eligible for. I will say that the accounts are not directly linked. And the main reason is, and I'll just be transparent with you, students applied to less scholarships when they thought their parents could see their scholarship applications. Typically, that's related to things like LGBTQ and things like DACA and stuff like that. So we don't allow parents currently to see it. We're working on a solution, but you can fill in your students' information and see match opportunities and either share them with them or apply for them.
Bethany,
Yes.
how are 529s considered in FAFSA and other student aid?
Great question. It changed a little bit this year, I will tell you that. In the past, any 529 that you held would be considered on all of your students' FAFSA. So if you had 2 children in college at the same time and you had 3 kids all with 529s, all 3 of their 529 balances would be on both of those FAFSAs. That is no longer the case. Now the 529 is only included if it is in the name of that student. So siblings, 529 plans are no longer included. Additionally, another change that happened is that 529 plans held by grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, that for the benefit of that student no longer are factored into the FAFSA either. So that's a really good change that has happened with the FAFSA. But the 529 balance is considered as an asset on that student's FAFSA.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Kind of scroll up and just make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah. Okay, I don't think I see